Today we're painting a scene of Maui, palm trees, beaches, water, but we're also going to talk a little bit about composition and the importance of composition to every painter. We encounter composition when we start to think about what we want to say in a painting and how we want to say it. And this is a little different stage than simply copying. So when we start to design our own painting, one of the first things to consider is a center of interest, a place in the painting where you're going to be telling a story or show a little more of a interesting light or focal point. Once you do this, other areas fall into place and you're able to balance the painting much more easily. You saw this image with a bullseye on it. This is to show you that a good place for the center of interest in your painting is at a different distance from either side of the paper. What this does is it starts from a point of imbalance and allows the painter to compose and rebalance the painting with a little more energy. If we started with our center of interest directly in the center of the painting, we start from sort of a static position, a non-energy position, and things become symmetrical and less interesting. So thinking about your center of interest before you start to paint in the sketching phase, when you're plotting your shapes and figures and everything that's going to be included, is a good practice. Eventually, it leads to a more fluent communication through your painting. In any case, this watercolor is about a beach scene with a major center of interest in the figures and a minor center of interest in the palms above. That's my intention anyway. So the other parts of the scene will become contributors, but they'll be minor actors. If we think about how a director works when he's staging a production or she's staging a production of a play, there's main characters and then there's minor characters, and the main characters are carrying the story, and the minor characters are supporting the action and the story that the director is trying to tell. This is the same principle in painting. We are just using visual means to do it, and visual art has its own idiom, its own language, and part of this course is to discover what the vocabulary is and how to use it. Wow, that came in fast. Sorry, my camera kind of missed the painting of the water, but you can see that I started with the sand, moved to the palms, and spent some time with the palms to get lights and darks. The reason I'm doing the palms first and the background second is so I can preserve some of those bright greens. If I had started with a blue in the sky first and painted the palms on top of that, I wouldn't have been able to realize the bright yellowish green. It would have become cooler and duller. So there's a reason in this case, to paint the sky and the background after painting the palms. I still want to make the sky lively, in other words, have a bit of change, so I'm trying to make a little gradient wash, darker at the top, lighter towards the horizon. The mountain has some red with it and some strokes to give us a feeling that it's coming forward. A lot of dry brush in that white foamy area, and some deep reflections painted dry into wet in the shallow water, the surf that's coming up above. So the palms have had a chance to dry, and I'm going back in to restate some of the dark shadows, or to, let's say, unify those shadows, connect them as they were a little scattered before, using a really dark mix, very dry color, of my sap green and a little black and a little ultramarine blue produces a strong dark. This strong dark is what's essentially creating the feeling of a strong light on the tops of the palms and on the sand. And you can tell that there's some palms at the end of the beach here which have a little more of the typical character. When they are gathered and bunched as they are on the right side, it's more visually confusing. But a funny thing about the visual language, if we give our audience one or two palms in this case that really look like a palm tree, in other words, these on the periphery, where we have some really distinctive branches and trunks to be seen, that's enough. They will imply these clear palm trees to be kind of gathered palm trees or grouping of palm trees to the right, and they'll understand that it's all palm trees. So the artist can work with that and should work with that, because if we try to paint every single branch in that big grouping of palm trees, we end up with a confusing and visually tiring area. So in this case, less is more. Adding the strong touches to the rocks below and dragging that dark to the left to connect the left and right. There's a nice strong dark passage moving behind everything. This last stage I'm adjusting. I feel the white in the surface a little too bright, so I'm adding dry brush. I'm also adding a slightly warmer blue to the water as it comes forward, enhancing the reflections to give it the shallows a stronger feeling of wetness, and long, deep reflections from the figures and from the palms overhead really help to make that a beautiful area. The left whites are within the surf. There's a few brights in the palms that retain that bright yellow color, so I'm pleased. And the last thing I'll do will be to add some thicker paint right from the tube, a little bit of Jaune Brilliant, which is made by Holbein, and a little bit of Cad Orange Red to give a nice focus to that mid area. A little bit of red against all that green really stands out, and it's another way that the painter can create a bit of excitement in a small shape.